Mommy Track Daddy Whispers podcast is now called Birth Agni Podcast.
Welcome to Mommy Track Daddy Whispers Podcast, Season 3.
So your doula is coming and really creating a sacred, safe space during those prenatals, during that time before when you're doing the preparation and really getting a better understanding of who you are and meeting you at that point. I had gone through med school for so many years, I think an identity crisis, right? Like I was trying to be somebody that I am on another level, but I'm not so deep in the system. Like I can't follow those rules.
Hello, I'm your host Divya, and today's episode is a part of the Doula Stories, a series for this season. I'm sitting with Nidhi Seth today. She is a doula from Ontario who believes in birth as a divine process and women, the prime bearer of that divinity. Alongside being a certified doula, she is a Ayurvedic postpartum doula, prenatal and postnatal yoga instructor, and she provides many other layers of perinatal support. This is part 1 of our conversation, where we discuss various aspects of birth, how Nidhi approaches birth, what does it mean to have a doula by your side, and what does a cesarean section mean. And if you like what you hear, consider giving us a review on Apple Podcasts, like this episode on any other application that you're using. Thank you so much. Let's begin. Nidhi, so good to see you. Hi, finally meeting.
It's so good to see you too. Thank you so much for rescheduling with me about 30 times.
Not really, but the profession that you're in, it demands time and it demands being, spontaneous. So it is understandable. Nidhi, from your Instagram stories and when I was reading about you, from the first picture that comes up on your website, it does come across that birth to you is a very spiritual process. And
For sure.
Yeah, so why is that?
Well, I think it's like the essence of creation, right? Like you can't create something without a soul. And, there's that in everything. There's a spirit in everything, even in plastic. So the act of creating life is spirit first, has to create that intention. And then it's the physical body that takes precedence. So I think before we used to assume, oh yeah, we're just having a baby, but each and every single one of us is completely uniquely different. So we are all source fractalized. And so it is a very spiritual experience, especially what the mother goes through. No one can replicate those feelings.
Yeah. When you provide service, when you, help a mother in her journey of giving birth, what is it that actually makes this a better experience? Would you elaborate on your,
There is a different kind of prep work that is involved where your general health practitioner, whether it's your OB or your midwife, is only providing a certain amount of that. And, they have so many people that they're attending to. They can't really manage all of your feelings and how you want to go through this process. And every single person is unique, right? Like some people are all about the medication. Some people are not about that. And so your doula is there to really tailor your experience to what you're looking for, or even if you're not really sure, to give you and present you with options that maybe you're not even aware of. So your doula is coming and really creating a sacred, safe space during those prenatals, during that time before when you're doing the preparation and really getting a better understanding of who you are and meeting you at that point. Where sometimes your OB or your midwife has their own agenda and they're not really interested in your feelings or how you're going through or what experiences you've been through or the traumas that maybe you've gone through already and working with that. And so your doula, or I speak for myself, is really starting to really understand who you are and how to bring about that strength that you always have with you, but to remind you of what it is that's always existed,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nidhi, when I was very curious when I was to, get to start this, recording and get to know you better. I was very curious to know, is there a common thread when it comes to the requirements that your clients, present to you, maybe in the first handful of conversations that you have with them, trying to prepare them for the birth?
Would you say the initial like consultations, or kind of in the prenatals already?
Wherever, but is there a common requirement, or a subtle requirement that you always find that, okay, this is what is required, and that has really kept you hooked on to this very, 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 very wonderful profession that you're in?
Totally. I mean, I think in the beginning when I was a doula, I was just so eager to work, and you kind of just work with everyone and everyone, you're just like, I want to work. I want to take everyone. And as you slowly start to get involved in this work, or specifically me, I started to see that the way I really wanted to support people or support women and birthing persons, birthing women, was really to be outside of the hospital system, to be really at the home birth. So now my clients are tailored to more where I can see the vision and how to help them get there. Yeah. Because then for me, I'm just living my most authentic self, and I'm resonating and bringing in those same clients who are very authentic to me. And it's not to say you have to have an unmedicated home birth and things don't happen. Things of course happen. And that way I'm very adaptable. But for me to say, I choose to work with individuals who want to really test their core foundation. But I'm very fluid, and I understand that situations change, especially when you hire clients 8 months before, and things change. By the time the last few weeks of pregnancy, sometimes things change and you have to work with those changes. So there is definitely an energy that's being drawn in. And I think that works for every single individual in this organization. Is you start to draw on the people who are like you, versions of you out there. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, creating a community like this.
Absolutely.
Before we go on to that entire concept of, having a very spiritual experience and how do you approach birth is one of the questions that I had on my mind. I'll go back to 2017. And it was interesting to read your story on how you started. You were in medical school for almost 8 whopping years, and then something changed. Mm-hmm. I was very curious, and if I can ask that, a very personal question, sure. Maybe. Yeah. So was that a gradual change, or was that a lingering change? What happened? What made you, change gears?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're an Indian woman, you have certain expectations on you. You're either a doctor, lawyer, engineer. Those are your 3 professions of choice. And if those are not working out for you, the last resort is you're never going to find anything, right? And I had gone through med school for so many years. I think an identity crisis, right? Like I was trying to be somebody that I am on another level, but I'm not so deep in the system. Like I can't follow those rules. And so it pushed me to start working with more herbal medicine and plant medicine. And it just opened up my heart, if anything. And it really started to make me see how vulnerable I was and how much I needed to step back from that system and start to find out who I was, because I was completely lost. I didn't know who I was. I knew the things that I would do to make myself appear better, but I didn't know who I was. And so thus began me I was living in Europe at the time. Specifically, I was living in Prague at the time, and I left Prague, came back to Toronto thinking I'll take a year off, and never went back. So yeah. It was really just these moments. It was like these moments that I was like, this is not something I feel good about. But we're so taught how to not follow our intuition in this part of the world. This is the problem with this life, is that we're not taught to follow our intuition. We're told to suppress. And if something is hard, you have to work harder, and you shouldn't go against your family or your parents. And you're so much doing this people pleasing that you're constantly doing. And it takes a lot to kind of step back and be like, no, this is my life. Just because you brought me in doesn't mean you own me. And this is the kind of thing that I put so much guilt and shame onto myself that if I didn't complete this, I was nobody. And so when I came back to Toronto has a really great conscious community. There's yoga, there's holistic care, there's so many different types of therapies that are happening. You could literally find everything and anything under the sun that possibly you ever wanted to in one city. And I was very blessed to come back to such an open-minded city and, kind of just began my journey. I started doing lots of yoga. yoga became, doing occasional. Then I started doing teacher training. The teacher training center that I did it at kind of opened up my world to shamanic plant medicine. And that took me into a very different psycho-spiritual world where my whole entire fabric of my reality changed overnight. I was like, there is something beyond this that I'm supposed to be here to do. And ironically, it was my dad who told me about doula. He's like, Nidhi, you should be a doula. And I said, no, I don't want to be a doctor. Like, I'm done with you guys. Please stop forcing me. He said, no, it's not. It's a doula. I'm like, what is it? He says, I don't know. I said, okay, great. Well, if you don't know, I don't know. So I was very, very stubborn for about 2 months. Finally, then I called. I'm like, okay, like, what is this? What is this profession? And ironically, I had moved out of the house at that time, and I moved right in front of the doula center, and I had no idea. So it's funny how like spirit is moving to bring you out of certain situations, to present you with another option. And the minute I went in for that consult to see, hey, like, what do you guys do? And I just fell in love with the work. And I'm like, this is actually a job. You get to actually be there for women and help them take care of their babies and help them through the most incredible journey of their life. And me being in med school, you would think I have known something. I knew nothing. I knew zero. I knew nothing. All I knew is what the physical body does, but not what the emotional body is going through, what these women are going through, the trauma that we carry, the DNA, the ancestral DNA, that is really a huge factor onto how we birth and the environment that we're in. And that just made me realize, wow, every single little moment in your life is going to be affected. And when you're bringing life into the most vulnerable state of mind, everything that you ever dealt with is going to come right up. Some people can do doula work and not have any spiritual connection to it. Some people can do doula work and have a very spiritual connection to it. And for me, that's what I wanted. I'm like, it needs to have meaning, because I came from a system that had no meaning. It was very like, this is your body. This is the science. Trust this, trust that. And then you see, actually, there's an emotional soul that has all these experiences that are mixed in now. And now you have to deal with real people who, a doula is like, it's really like your best friend going to help you labor, is there to hold space for your journey. And it's evolved into something very beautiful now, where I have different modalities. I have belly binding and postpartum and Ayurveda and herbalism, and much more. So it started off with me wanting to help people, but it turned my path into, no, you need to help people kind of outside of the system, because these are the people who are really going to need help now. The system has too many people that they, have like mind controlled. There is a place for it, and I totally respect that. But the way I've seen birth is there is so much other things going on, and there needs to be that authentic start, the authentic self coming back in.
Yeah. I had goosebumps when you said the spirit moves around and finally finds its path. And I really, really understand what you're trying to imply when you say an entirely spiritual path and how you want to work outside the system. But just to, help our listeners understand this better, did this kind of an activism, I would say this is trying to bring a social change. Was it there when you started? And how did it gradually happen, if it did?
I think it was always there. I think for me, going into the births in the hospitals really was horrifying. It was very traumatic. The things that I would witness, the physical abuse, the trauma, I get emotional thinking about it, because it was bad already then, and it's just gotten worse. And it's that there is this God mentality with these practitioners who have all this education. And then you have these vulnerable women, and people come and take advantage of them, and they put fear into them. And, then it was very hard for me to speak, because I'm still finding my own voice. I mean, I'm still developing myself. But the more you go through it, more and more, you're like, what am I putting up with? What is the divine feminine dealing with? And it's literally coercion. It's a very unbalanced side of the patriarch that has infiltrated the medical system and has indoctrinated everything. The way the nurses are handling things, the way the midwives are handling, the traditional birth keeping is not sacred anymore, especially when you take birth, a very sacred experience, and you put it into a room full of machines and so many different types of people. Already my judgment is that, birth should be left for women. It is a woman's industry. It is a female-based industry because of this. And I was seeing left, right, and center so many cervical checks, episiotomies, things that were really not even medical emergencies, but somehow it escalated to that. And by that point, your client is already so scared, they're going to trust the medical professions. And I have to take a step back and say, okay, this is your journey. This is your decision. So now it's very different. Now I'm very truthful and honest because I have to go by my experience and I let the client decide. At the end of the day, I'm not there to change anyone's decision. I'm there to hold space for what they want to do. But there is a way, obviously, to talk about things and how we get across. But really, it was the birth trauma, the amount of things. I think I've maybe had about 90 births, and so many of them traumatized. Just practitioners having no bedside manner and the hospital taking no liability for what they do. It's pretty horrifying. And if Canada is like this, I can only imagine other places. You know, Canada, people think Canada is such a modern country. Means nothing. You know, you're better off delivering in the villages where actually it was safer when you had medicine women who would be delivering the baby, 7, 8 kids. You know, my grandmother birthed 4 kids at home, my great grandmother 10. This is what was happening. So here, already with one birth, you know, we're become medical dependent on all the medications. It's like you're just waiting for things at that point.
And do you think it is also because there is a lot of fear in the hospital setup, in the entire medical system? Do you think fear is a lot more attached to birth than really finding a way to help women navigate what they're already hardwired to?
Absolutely, right? And it really comes down to nowadays, we're not surrounded by birth. We're not living in communities. We're not living in villages. We're not seeing breastfeeding very normally. We're kind of, you know, modern society. I mean, especially here in India, you still have a chance to live with families. Here, you're separate. You are not seeing, I haven't seen my mother in 2 weeks. This is how separate we are, you know, just because you have your own life, you have your own home, you want to do everything yourself. So when we're not surrounded by birth, we're not surrounded by these people who are there to educate us, it becomes fear, because everyone loves to share their horrific stories because the world is based on trauma. It's like the DNA it's stuck in the DNA. You know, you look at how your 7 generations back, how your ancestors birthed, that's the DNA you're carrying, probably further. And there's no point blaming them because they're all dead. So it's us taking responsibility at this time to be like, stop relying externally on other people to make all your decisions, right? And it really comes down to how you grow up, your environment, what you tell yourself every day, the rituals that you take in your own day, and honestly, how healthy you are. People who are in a chronic state of illness, of course their fear is more because they're sick. And this is what we're dealing with you don't have to look too far to hear the news. This is what we're dealing with. Whether it's true or not, this is the state of mind. It's been hijacked many years ago. So if we as women take responsibility to be like, I want to take control of my body, I want to take control of my birth so my children have a chance to experience that is how we can change it. And things are really changing. You know, the truth is coming out in so many different ways that, you know, it is the age of Aquarius. It's all coming out and it's very intense and it's all has to come out because there's too much repression and too much suppression. And, you know, especially as a woman, if you're bringing life in, you are the divine creator. You are the most important figure because you're literally birthing life. And if you are not sound, you affect everything that child is going to go through. Yeah. Every little thing. So even in the womb, every experience the mother is having is all traveling to the mother. Everything. I mean, to the baby, sorry. So mother to baby, everything. So sometimes I've had clients where they go through a really traumatic first birth, second birth, it's 180 completely different. Some clients, they had a good birth. They thought that was a great birth. They have it happen again to them. They said, oh my God, I can't believe I went through this again. And then the third time, some people are like, no, I'm not going through any of that. Cut all of that out. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm saying. And this is how I'm having it. Right? So there's so many layers and levels to this. But I think our divine female side is finally coming back and we're rebalancing back to ourselves. It's a lot. We need a community because without community, it's hard for us. And this is the very ancient rituals to have women's circles, women community to empower each other, empower ourselves, to bring in life. I mean, I think that's the whole entire world is based on creation. Everything is a thought. Everything is created. So this is no different. This is actually the most sacred act. Even the act of having sex has to be so consciously thought about, because if we're not consciously doing that, we're not consciously parenting, we're not consciously bringing these children in, and it's just a cycle that's just spinning around.
Yeah. How everything is connected to the mind. We are physiological beings, and somehow, from what I hear from you and from all that I'm reading as a student of childbirth education, is that we are drifting away from how our emotions impact our health, and the entire medical system has already drifted away from that. Like you said, somebody who goes through the first traumatic birth actually realizes there was something amiss, something was needed. And do you think this change, as it is coming, it is also required in all aspects of life, not just birth? And birth actually makes us realize that we need to fix ourselves in so many ways.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the power to change, it's a slow crawl too, right? You can't be like, I want to change, and one day magically everything's just, we have these habits, but it is doing the little baby steps every day and implementing little steps every single little day. Where some people, I had one client a year ago. She said she was working all the time. She was on the computer all the time. Her baby was breech, and she didn't know what that meant. She had no idea what that was. And, she had her cesarean because the baby didn't turn. And she didn't realize the implications of everything that she had focused so much on her work. And, at that time she was living in the States. So the States is very work driven. They only give like postpartum 6 weeks actually to most new mothers, which is like just horrific. Here it's still a year and a half, 6 weeks in the US. And she said that was the catalyst. The 5 years of hell that she went through was the catalyst to say, okay, things are going to be different. She went back to India. She did Ayurvedic treatments. She became a vegan. Not that you have to become a vegan to do any of this. This is just how she changed her lifestyle, started reading ingredients, labels, started learning about birth options. And she started saying, I need someone to help me. And she happened to find me. So in that way, when you want to change, the universe is going to only work with you to do that. But it is the little steps, and sometimes it is about changing your whole entire world, because birth is one of those experiences you're never going to forget. You're never going to forget your birth experience. You can try and do whatever you want. As long as the kid is there, your kid is going to be the reminder every time. As long as you have friends giving birth, as long as you're hearing about it, it's always going to be a trigger. So why not have that experience and learn from that? And change. And not everyone does change. It really comes down to your conviction and how hard you believe in yourself. And sometimes it takes a few different things to nudge you in the right direction. It's like spirit is going to keep on returning the same lesson until you're ready to receive it. That's how powerful it is. And we are magnetic. Like, we are constantly creating situations for ourselves to see if we get out of it, which is even more diabolical, more like crazy.
Yeah.
So
saying all this, it brings to me a story about my friend where she was like, Divya, why don't I opt for cesarean? I'm really scared of labor because my mother had a very difficult labor. And I did try and explain to her. And then again, like this comes, you give space for everybody's decision. And I was thinking that probably if I tell her to undergo a natural birth right there, and if she has a bad experience, it will be all the more traumatic for her. And I was thinking, how do I bring that balance and tell her about the pros and cons of opting for it, rather than trying to have that right on a call. I'm not really talking to her, not meeting her. So and what happened really after was she joined a hospital. She had moved cities, and that hospital was, and there were Lamaze classes. She learned all about it. She learned how she needs to rely, and she can rely on her own ability to birth. And there were labor management techniques. So she was really fearless. And then she called me, Divya, I'm packing my bag, and I'm going to the hospital, and I'm absolutely okay. I said, what is it about your decision to go for cesarean? And she said, I'm okay. Like everybody around her had cesarean, and that was the reason that she thought cesarean was okay. It was safer. And right after we had a call, in about 3 to 4 hours, she called me back saying, see, this is the baby I delivered. And I was like, wow, you were talking to me like 4 hours back and you did not realize you were in labor. And she had a blissful birth. And that was the word she wrote down to me. And I was like, I somewhere down the line felt that this is our win as birth professionals, as people who are putting themselves into it.
Sure.
So, Nidhi, what is your take? Since we did talk about the physiological aspect of birth and everything, what is your take on cesarean as a medical tool?
So for me, I look at cesarean birth as when there's a medical emergency. Absolutely. Like there's no way even around that. Medical emergency, the placenta has detached, the amniotic fluid has reduced significantly. Babies has stopped breathing inside. Those things do happen. And other reasons. For that, it is a medical emergency. People forget that a cesarean is abdominal surgery. You are going through 7 layers of your body. 7 layers. They're going through your skin, your muscle, your peritoneum, another layer of your abdominal muscles, another layer of skin, and then they cut into your uterus. So this is a very invasive surgery. So there needs to be that kind of explanation because I don't think people really understand. They think, oh, the cut open baby comes out and like, oh my God, everyone's happy and here we go. But cesarean is a life-saving procedure and it should be used in emergency cases. There are cases where women have had sexual abuse and have gone through things, very traumatic experience in their life where they cannot even fathom pushing a baby through the vaginal canal because the vaginal canal has been traumatized. And that is deep therapeutic work that needs to be done. And for some people, maybe it doesn't come around. So for that, I believe it is a life-saving procedure. The problem with the cesarean sections now is it's happening like every other day. 50% of women going into labor, almost close to 50, are cesareans. It's a pretty outstanding number. And the reason is because, for one example it's one thing to have an emergency. Absolutely. We'll take that out right here. The babies who are breech, there's no room, there's no experts who are actually able to deliver breech babies. This is like crazy. Like even giving space to the baby to even go through labor to the very end, that the baby even knows how to turn. We don't give room for this. We just say, oh, let's just cut it open and you're going to have your baby and everything's going to be fine. But people forget, already postpartum is already hard enough. Now you have to deal with a body that has been opened. Breastfeeding is usually delayed. The healing aspect of your abdominal muscles, you're looking at 6 weeks bed rest. And, most people are not doing that. They're getting up, then they're having internal bleeding, then they're having rectus diastases, then they're having organ prolapse, uterine prolapse. These are things that women are dealing with, and it's literally silencing. And the thing in Canada is you get so many prenatal appointments. You do your cesarean, you get 1 postpartum appointment 6 weeks later. There is no care for you. There's no care for you. So unless I look at it as that is an emergency life-saving procedure, but the way we are medically coercing these women to be birthed in this way is astounding. You can't tell me so many women are unable to birth. This is not possible. I've had so many doctors say, oh, your baby's too big for your body. I'm going to have to cesarean it. It's like your baby was born knowingly how to come out of your body and your pelvis. The only person doubting your body and you is your healthcare provider. And that's someone who, if you don't like, you can fire them. People forget. You don't work for them. They work for you. And so this is where the white coat syndrome really takes precedent. So there is a lack of education. There's a lack of professionals who know how to actually do breech. And there's a lack of education on what is the cesarean like and the healing and the side effects, the things that can possibly go wrong. There's a lot of things that happen from it. And for some women, they didn't have a choice. They didn't have a choice. They had to go through it. And I had a client who went from having a home birth to a cesarean. Like you can imagine the state of trauma in that moment where she now has to connect to why did this happen? Why is this happening? And so for some people, this is your birth journey. This is your birth story. And you have to make peace with that. But there also has to be a lot of education around the pre and post operative care because the rate of which we are going into these women's bodies and opening them up, there is not a healing aspect that's happening after that. Not many people know about this stuff. So cesarean is life-saving and should be used with extreme caution. Absolutely.
Yeah. And we leave it at that today. In the next part of this conversation, we extend our discussion to the significance of emotional release, postpartum support for new mothers, and focus on the core ability in you to birth. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to your messages, feedback, suggestions. Share this episode with someone who needs it today. Be someone's support. Trust me, every small effort helps us grow. Stay tuned for part 2. Keep listening.